السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, today we're going to be speaking about the life of Uthmaan ibn Affan radiallahu an. And Uthmaan ibn Affan radiallahu an was the son-in-law of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was a member of the Quraysh tribe in Mecca, and he was given many titles. His name is Uthmaan ibn Affan ibn Abil As ibn Umayyah ibn Abd Shams ibn Abd Munaf. So he's connected to the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ with Abd Munaf, because the people of Quraysh, they were all related in some way or another if you went further back to their forefathers. And Uthmaan ibn Affan radiallahu an was born in the city of Mecca, and of course he was part of the great clan of the Quraysh tribe, and he was born 7 years after the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. So he was younger than the Prophet ﷺ by around 7 years. And he's also known as the companion of the two lights, or the possessor of the two lights, Dhun Nurayn. Why was he called Dhun Nurayn? Because he married two of the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ subsequently. So he married one daughter, Ruqayya radiallahu anha, and then she passed away, and then he married Kulthum radiallahu anha. So he was known as the possessor of the two lights, the only companion who married two of the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ. And what does that show us about Uthman radiallahu anhu? It shows us his status in the eyes of the Prophet ﷺ, that he was somebody so loved that when the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he wanted to marry him off to his other daughter. It shows how much love he had for Uthman radiallahu anhu. It shows a lot about his character and his personality. And Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu, his father, whose name was Affan, died while he was traveling. So he was traveling for trade, as was the business of the Quraysh. He was traveling for trade, and while he was traveling, he ended up passing away while Uthman radiallahu an was of a young age. And so Uthman radiallahu an inherits a large amount of money from his father. And Uthman follows the same profession as his father. He becomes a trader just like his father, and his business flourished. So he was a very successful businessman. So he was a member of the Quraysh, this is of course before Islam, and he was a very successful businessman. In fact, they say he was one of the richest men amongst the Quraysh. So in the whole of the city, one of the richest men was Uthman radiallahu an. So it wouldn't be a far stretch to say he was a millionaire of those days. He was a very wealthy, very successful businessman. He was known also for his akhlaq and for his personality. He was known for his good manners. He was somebody who was very humble, and he was also known for his shyness. And he was also known for his beauty. They say he was a very handsome person. And they say that when he married Ruqayya radiallahu anha, the people would say that these are the two most beautiful and most handsome people today in Mecca. Because Ruqayya was also known for her beauty, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. And he was also somebody who had this shyness. So these attributes, these personality traits, when they're combined, a person who is known for his beauty, but he's somebody who's very humble, he's quite shy in his nature, and he's also a millionaire. These are very attractive qualities, because normally if you think of a millionaire, he's somebody who's loud, somebody who's arrogant, somebody who isn't really a shy person. So when you see somebody who's a millionaire and then he's very shy, very humble, it adds to his positive qualities. It's a beautiful quality to have, especially in the circumstances of a person who is very rich. He's a millionaire. So this is why the people of Mecca actually had lots of love for Uthman radiallahu an. They loved Uthman a great deal. Everyone knew who he was, because he was a millionaire. He wasn't somebody who was, unsuccessful or something. He was a very successful businessman, but he was humble and shy. So people, they grew attached to Uthman. They had this love and fondness and affection for Uthman radiallahu anhu. And it's also said that during the night time when mothers would put their children to bed, they would sing like rhymes, nursery rhymes, and they would sing things to make their children go to sleep. And one of the things they would say was about Uthman. They would say, أُحِبُّكَ وَالرَّحْمَنِ حُبُّ قُرَيْشٍ لِعُثْمَانِ. It was like a rhyme that they would say and sing to their children. أُحِبُّكَ وَالرَّحْمَنِ. I love you by the most merciful. حُبُّ قُرَيْشٍ لِعُثْمَانِ. Just like the love Quraysh have for Uthman. That's what they would say. They would sing it. They would say, أُحِبُّكَ وَالرَّحْمَنِ حُبُّ قُرَيْشٍ لِعُثْمَانِ. And it was, again, a sign of the love and the fondness that the Quraysh had for Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. His mother, her name was Arwa, and she was the daughter of Hakim bint Abdul Muttalib. So she's the granddaughter of Abdul Muttalib. And this is Uthman's mother. And the Prophet ﷺ is also the granddaughter of Abdul Muttalib. So Abdul Muttalib and the Prophet ﷺ and Uthman's mother were cousins. They were cousins. And Uthman radiallahu anhu grew up, and he was a merchant. He was a cloth merchant. His business grew rapidly. He became one of the top businessmen of the city, and he would often travel for trade and for business. And he would visit Sham, Syria, and he became wealthy. And of course, when you become wealthy, you also have a status among society, a higher status because of your wealth. You become an important person because you're a rich person. So along with his wealth, he also had an increase in terms of his status. People had more respect for him. His status in society grew also because of him being a millionaire. And again, a person who is very rich, when they start going up in ranks and they become very important in society, and they become like they have senior positions in society, normally that adds to their sense of entitlement, or they become more arrogant, or they feel like they're better than others. But again, this wasn't the case with Uthman. He was somebody who was very rich. He had a respectable position in society. But even though he had this position, he was still somebody who was known for his shyness. He was a very shy person. And to give you an example of this, is once when the Prophet ﷺ was sitting in his home, and he was relaxing in his home, and part of his leg was showing. He wasn't covered with his clothes. Part of his leg was showing. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anh entered, and he sat down, and they were talking, and he came to see the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet never changed his position. And then Umar radiallahu anh entered, the same thing, gave salam, sat down, and they were discussing and speaking and talking, and he's still in the same state. And Uthman radiallahu anh entered. When Uthman radiallahu anh entered, the Prophet ﷺ sat up and covered part of his leg that was uncovered. And Aisha radiallahu anh noticed this. And later when they left, she said, when Abu Bakr entered, when Umar entered, you didn't do anything, you just stayed how you were. When Uthman entered, you covered your leg. And so he said, shouldn't I be shy in front of a person whom the angels are shy of when he's in their presence? So even the angels would be shy of Uthman radiallahu anh. And it's very interesting. I remember there was a scholar who came to visit, and one of the brothers, he said that when I met him, he was a very, very shy person in private. So he obviously do talks and everything, but in private he was a very shy person, this Shaykh. And the brother, he said that I sat with him and I was like trying to talk to him, but he was so shy that it made me feel shy. I felt shy being with him because he was so shy. So it's interesting, quality that when a person has this level of shyness, you also maybe feel a bit reserved and shy yourself. It's a good quality to have, this shyness and modesty. Some people, for example, in school, they'll say, he's very shy, and they don't want people to be shy. They want people to speak. But there's a difference between shyness and confidence. You can be shy, but you can also be confident. You don't speak much, but when you have to speak, you'll speak with clarity, and you'll speak and you say the right things, and you're confident in speaking. So there's a difference between shyness and confidence. And the two aren't like complete opposites. So a person can be shy, but he can also be confident. Uthman radiallahu anh was like this, because in certain situations he would actually speak up. And as we mentioned, he was the right-hand man of Umar radiallahu anh. So we spoke about Umar radiallahu anh. We spoke about how Umar was the right-hand man for Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. It was like he was his deputy. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anh passed away, Umar radiallahu anh used to be the strict one, Abu Bakr used to be the soft one. When Umar was the leader, he had Uthman radiallahu anh to be the soft one. And Umar radiallahu anh was strict in nature, even though he softened after he became the Uthman, to kind of balance things out. So it's very interesting. Uthman radiallahu anh would sometimes speak to Umar radiallahu anh, and he would give him advice. And he wasn't afraid to speak his mind and give advice, being the person who was the radif, as they say in Arabic. The word radif, it was used in those days. They would they would call Uthman the radif. In the time of Umar, they would call Uthman the radif. A radif means a future leader. It was a title given to somebody who would eventually become the leader. So again, it was this idea in those days, even before Umar had passed away, that Uthman was one day going to be a leader. The point is here, he wasn't somebody who was not confident. He was shy, but he was somebody who had confidence. I mean, he's a millionaire. You don't just become a millionaire by not being confident. So it really shows us his personality. And Uthman radiallahu anh, one day he was traveling back from a business trip, and it's said that there was a voice while they were traveling and they were camping. There was a voice mentioning that Ahmad has been called, or Ahmad is calling others to the worship of Allah, or listen to the call of Ahmad. He heard a voice, and this voice was telling him to go to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he arrived in Mecca, the voice he had heard was true, because now the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was calling others to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling to this religion of worshipping Allah, to Tawheed. And he spoke to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, who was of course already a Muslim, and then he decided to accept Islam. And he mentions to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he had heard a voice while he was traveling, calling to Uthman to become a Muslim and to follow the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Uthman radiallahu anh, he was one of the earliest converts to Islam. Some say he was the third man to accept Islam. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, Zayd ibn Haritha, and Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anh. Some say he was the third in line, and his conversion to Islam angered his clan. He was from the Banu Umayyah clan. Which tribe was the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from? Sorry? Banu Hashim, good. Yeah, so he was from Banu Hashim, and Uthman radiallahu anh was from Banu Umayyah. And as we said, they were all eventually linked to, like, the forefathers, but they were all part of Quraysh. Under Quraysh you had different tribes, but they were all connected, somehow they were all somehow related. And of course Banu Umayyah were very angry when Uthman radiallahu anh accepted Islam, because they were opposed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were opposed to Banu Hashim. They were rivals, these two tribes. And so to accept his message was like accepting Banu Hashim, or giving in to Banu Hashim, or acting like as if Banu Hashim is better than Banu Umayyah. And of course Banu Umayyah can't compete because they don't have a prophet and messenger. So the Prophet ﷺ was calling people to the worship of Allah, and his daughter Ruqayya radiallahu anha was engaged to the son of Abu Lahab. This is before Islam. And when they found out he was calling people to the worship of Allah idols, Abu Lahab cut off the engagement. In fact, he sent his son to go to the house of the Prophet ﷺ to publicly announce that he's cutting off the engagement. And he started humiliating and cursing and mocking the Prophet ﷺ and the family of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is obviously their intention was to humiliate the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Because even nowadays, when people are engaged, something happens, you cut it off, but of course it's not done openly, it's done in private, out of respect for both families. For whatever reason, sometimes an engagement can be called off, but it's always done privately. So imagine, going publicly, and just calling out and shouting out in front of the house and saying, this and this and this happened, and you've done this and this, and I'm going to cut. It's a show of power, basically. It's a sign of a complex, a superiority complex, and they want to show their authority and their power trip, like they say. So, of course, whenever a calamity befalls a Muslim, something better is always in store for those Muslims who are patient. So the engagement was cut off. Abu Lahab was obviously a respected person in those days, from a respected family, the son of Abdul Muttalib, the leader of Quraysh, etc. But of course, Allah had greater plans. So when the engagement was cut off, it said that Uthmaan radiallahu anh became very happy. And he approached the Prophet ﷺ for the hand of Ruqayya in marriage, and the Prophet ﷺ accepted, and he ended up marrying Ruqayya radiallahu anha. And of course, Uthmaan radiallahu anh is one of the richest men, one of the millionaires, and one of the most handsome people of Mecca. And so it was actually a perfect match for the two of them. And of course, Ruqayya radiallahu anha eventually did pass away, and he ended up marrying Kulthum radiallahu anha. And Uthmaan radiallahu anh, of course, he was from the early Muslims. It said that his mother was also a Muslim. So his mother accepted Islam. His father obviously died before Islam. His mother accepted Islam, and she passed away in Uthman radiallahu anhu's lifetime. And it said that when she passed away, he was one of the people carrying the body. So again, it shows us that she was a Muslim and she was a believer in Allah before even Uthman radiallahu anh, or after Uthman radiallahu anh, because he was one of the first people to accept Islam, but she passed away before Uthman radiallahu anh. And when the Muslims were being oppressed in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ allowed them to make the hijrah to Abyssinia. And Uthman radiallahu anh was one of those companions who went to Abyssinia. He did the hijrah from Mecca to Abyssinia, and he was there for a number of years, and eventually he made the return journey back to Mecca. And the hijrah to Abyssinia is always mentioned by scholars. When companions made the hijrah to Abyssinia, they always mention it, and it's a praiseworthy thing that they mention. Why is it a praiseworthy thing? Because you're making a sacrifice. You're traveling only for the sake of Allah. There's no good business opportunity. You don't have anyone there to protect you. You're not going on holiday. This isn't going to be fun. You don't know anybody there. It's going to be very difficult for you and your family. It could be dangerous. It's not like you want to go, you're forced to go. And so they sacrifice everything. They make their way to Abyssinia to stay there and to worship Allah freely. And the scholars mention this because it was a sacrifice that many of the companions made. From them, of course, was Uthman radiallahu anh, along with his wife Ruqayya radiallahu anha. And of course, you have to also understand he's a millionaire. Like, his life depends on, or his money, of course, Allah blessed him with all this wealth, but he made money because of the trade business. And you can't do the same trade business in Abyssinia. It's like nowadays when we decide to move city or move countries, we always think about money, isn't it? Sometimes we move because of jobs. And so you think about how you're going to earn a living. But of course, in those days, they would sacrifice everything, even when it came to money, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, in Mecca, Uthman radiallahu anh, after he returned, he had to basically start from scratch again. Because there were no banks in those days. His money may have been taken by others. He could only take whatever he could on the camels that he used and on the ship when they traveled to Abyssinia, which is of course in East Africa. So when he came back, he had to start again. But Allah again blessed Uthman radiallahu anh, because while he was in Abyssinia, he began to think, I can take advantage of this. Like, all these Muslims in my community need this service, need this water. I can make some money now. This is how people think, isn't it? They think, I bought this for so much money, I'm going to sell it and make some money off it. I have a house near my house, and it's next to a hospital. We have a hospital, it's next to the hospital. It's like, there's a roundabout, and it's on the corner of the roundabout, this house, and the hospital is like a right turn, and it's like a big, obviously, area. So I don't know who this person is. He has his house, and a few years ago now, he started to advertise free parking in his car park. for the house, because hospitals charge now if you park there, which is ridiculous. It's a joke anyway. It's ridiculous that car parks in hospitals charge. You go to a shopping centre and so you go to Morrison's or Asda and they don't charge for parking. You go to hospitals, they charge you for parking in hospitals. It's ridiculous. It's a joke. Anyway, it's a different topic. Very passionate about this. So anyway, this man, he starts to advertise car parking in his car park. Okay, maybe he can hold like 10 cars or something. And rudimentary signs, simple basic signs he's made himself, etc. Now he has NCP parking signs. He's got cameras. He's got solar panels powering the cameras or something. I don't know how. He's got like signs talking about how much he's charging, etc., etc. Mashallah, he's done I don't know who this person is, Muslim or non-Muslim, or who this guy was, or if somebody even lives in that house, or if it's just on rent or whatever. But the guy basically made his car park, his own parking and drive into a car park, because he thought people are struggling with parking in Heartlands Hospital. I'll make my own car park here in my house, and he's done a full proper job. Like, I don't know how he got the paperwork to actually make it in an NCP car park. I don't know what the details are and how a person goes about doing that. But subhanAllah, just the effort that he went into. And so it always makes me smile when I drive past, like he's really just taking advantage of the drive. He's sacrificed all the drive area, and now it's just for parking, and he's charging people to park there. Obviously, it's cheaper than the actual car park in the hospital. But, the initiative that people have. But imagine if he did that purely for the sake of Allah. If he was a Muslim, Allah knows best who this person is. May Allah, reward him and forgive him and, give him goodness in this life and the next. If he's a Muslim, I don't know. But imagine if he just gave it away for the sake of Allah and said, look, if you can't afford parking in the car park, just park here, no problem. Can you imagine the reward with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because we know what it's like. People, some people can't afford any money. The NHS is free so far, and they can't even afford to pay for parking. Okay, they can barely go to the hospital itself to be able to get treatment. Anyway, Uthmaan radiallahu an bought the well, and of course there were glad tidings for him because he was promised Jannah if he had given the well for the sake of the Muslims. There was another well also, and water was scarce, of course, in the city of Medina. And he starts negotiating with this man, also a Jewish man. So you can see the Jewish people in Medina were business-minded. And Uthmaan radiallahu anh tries to purchase the well. The man says, no way, I'm not going to give you the well. He starts offering a huge price, says, no, I'm not going to give it. He says, okay, I'll give you the money for half of the well. How do you have half of the well? One day it's for me, the next day it's for you. So one day the profits that I make are for me, the next day the profits you make for the well, that's for you. He says, okay, fine. So he gives him a fortune, like a huge amount of money. Not even for the whole well, just for half of the well. So people come, on the day it's the Jewish man's, he makes the money. The next day they go, it's Uthmaan radiallahu anhu's day to give the water. They say, how much is it? Uthmaan radiallahu anh says, you can take it for free, no problem. The next day the Jewish man comes, it's his day, no one comes. He's like, what's going on? Why is nobody coming? Fourth day, they all come on the day of Uthmaan radiallahu anh to get the free water. Fifth day, Jewish man comes, no one's coming for the water. He's like, what's going on here? He finds out Uthman's not charging for the water. He goes to Uthmaan and says, what are you doing? He says, what do you mean? He says, you're not charging for the water. He says, yeah, it's my day. I can charge whatever I want. If I want to give it for free, I can give it for free. What's your problem? I paid so much money for this, for half of the well. He says, no, you can't do this. I'm struggling now. He says, okay, if you're struggling, I'll pay for your part of the well as well. So he says, okay, I'll give you my part of the well, my half. He purchases the whole well, gives it all for the sake of the Muslims. So see how he's using his money as a form of power and to influence others into benefiting in return for benefiting the Muslims. That's his goal. So again, he's using his wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the Treaty of Hudaybiyah happened and there was peace for a short time between the Arabs, the Muslims flourished in number, and they needed to expand the masjid because it was too small because of the numbers of Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ appealed to the Muslims to financially raise funds so they can expand the masjid. Uthmaan radiallahu anh contributed to expanding the masjid, and he actually financed the entire project. And of course, I'm sure the brothers know how difficult it is sometimes to raise money for anything you want to do at the masjid. Imagine one person coming to you. You're saying we want to raise funds, 500,000. One man comes and says, how much is it, 500,000? Okay, I'll give you 500,000. I'll give you 500,000. You can just do the project now. Expand the masjid. This is what Uthmaan radiallahu anh did. So because of his wealth, anything that was needed to be done was done as a result of the wealth which Uthmaan radiallahu anh gave. And of course, again, the Prophet ﷺ gave him the glad tidings of paradise because of this also. There's an interesting story between him and Uthmaan radiallahu anh. Between him and Ali radiallahu anh. Between Uthman and Ali radiallahu anh. Ali radiallahu anh, as we know, married Fatima radiallahu anha. And he wasn't a rich man. And so the Prophet ﷺ said to him, have some money for the walima, so we can have a walima. So he went and he was selling his shield in the marketplace. And of course, he's a warrior. So nowadays people obviously they have their guns and they have things that they like using, they have hobbies and especially soldiers, etc. And it's their prized possession. You don't want to sell those things because it's part of who you are, it's part of your identity in a way. Ali radiallahu anh was a warrior. He didn't want to sell his shield, but he had to because he had to pay for the walima. Uthman radiallahu anh sees him and says, what's happening? He says, I'm getting married, I'm engaged to Fatima radiallahu anha, I'm selling the shield so I can have some money to have a walima as the Prophet has told me to. So Uthman radiallahu anh gave him a huge amount of money for the shield. Like it was, again, it shows his generosity. He gave him a huge amount of money for the shield. And Ali radiallahu anh was very happy. He was able to have a good walima. And of course, he's invited his friends. He's invited Uthman radiallahu anh. And the companions are giving him gifts. Uthman radiallahu anh gives him a gift. It's the shield. He gives him back the shield. Because this is your shield. You keep the shield. And he also gave him the wealth so that he could have the walima. So again, this influence of Uthman radiallahu anh. There was an incident when the Romans were being aware of the companions and of the Muslims and the threat of the Muslims. And the Prophet ﷺ,
I worked out, it's 3.7 million was how much he paid for the wealth.
10,000 dirhams.
Yeah.
3.7 million. Mashallah, you've been doing that all for the last 10, 15 minutes?
No, just
okay. Was it a website or?
I just did there because it's 4.25 grams per dirham, and obviously multiply that by 10,000. That's a lot of money.
Okay, I need to get that information from you so that I don't have to worry about converting in the future. How much was that?
3.69 million. Roughly.
The wow was 3.6 roughly. In today's times, around 3.6 million dollars. So how many pounds is that? I might as well ask you now because 3.6 million dollars, 2.5 million. Okay, around 2.5 million pounds in today's time. Imagine a person giving that much money for a well to help the Muslims by himself. I mean, we struggle in this country, and mashallah, Muslims are blessed with wealth to raise even 500,000. It can take months for some masajid, maybe even more than that. So it really shows us the generosity of Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anh. Another example was when the Prophet ﷺ wanted to send an army to fight the Romans. And he asked the companions to collect money. Uthman radiallahu anh had just had 300 fully equipped camels that had just come back from trade. And Uthman radiallahu anh, he gave all of the camels and everything that was on the camels from trade to the Prophet ﷺ to use as he wished so that he can fund the actual army. And on top of this, he gave 10,000 gold dinar. Okay, you can ask the brother about how much that would be. I don't know exactly how much that would be. But it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So he gave all the camels, 50 horses. He also gave for the Battle of Tabuk. Okay, this very same battle. And again, all of this, it was so much. It said that the Prophet ﷺ saw all the wealth in front of him. And he said, لا يضر عثمان ما فعل بعد اليوم. Nothing will harm Uthman after what he's done after today. He's done so much. Whatever he does from today onwards, nothing's going to harm him. Meaning Allah's guaranteed him Jannah. on top of all the previous incidents where the Prophet explicitly told him he's going to be granted Jannah. And this was Uthman radiallahu anhu's legacy. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he became the leader, again Uthman radiallahu anhu was from the close group that he would always consult. Umar, Uthman, Ali, the 10 promised Jannah, the other 10 promised Jannah, he would always be asking for their consultation. And when Abu Bakr asked Uthman, when he was on his deathbed, who should I choose, or what do you think about Umar being the leader? Uthman radiallahu anhu, he said, you know best, you're the leader. He said, no, I want your opinion. He said, what I know is that with regards to Umar, his inner Islam is better than his outward Islam. And that's a high praise. We know about Umar radiallahu anhu, but he's saying inwardly, his Islam is better than what we see, than what's apparent. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said to him, I'm happy you said this. I would have been disappointed if you had said anything else about Umar radiallahu anhu. Meaning you know about Umar, it shows you know what you're saying, you understand Umar radiallahu anhu is a good person, he's a person that's fit to be the leader after me. And of course in Umar radiallahu anhu's time, Uthman radiallahu anhu, as we said, he was a close deputy of Umar radiallahu anhu. He would like to have him with him whenever he would have, whenever he would make decisions, because as we said, Umar was stern, Uthman was soft, so he would balance out Umar radiallahu anhu's demeanor and his mindset and his the way he was, his personality. And in the lifetime of Umar radiallahu anhu, there was a severe drought called Ramada, or the year of Ramada. It was a very severe drought in Medina, and news came that Uthman radiallahu anhu was expecting a caravan of 1,000 camels loaded with food supplies, because he's a trader, that's what he does. So all the merchants rushed to his house. He opened the door, he says, what are you doing here? They said, we've heard you have food coming, 1,000 camels, we want to negotiate. So he brought them inside, they negotiated with him. They said, we're going to offer double the price for whatever you have. He says, why? They said, because the Muslims need the wealth, the Muslims need the food. So we're offering double the amount of wealth, double the amount of money, because the Muslims need it. He says, I've been given something more than this. Like, I've been offered more than this. They're thinking, more than double, okay. They said, we'll give you triple the price. He says, I've been offered more than this. So they're like, we are the only merchants in Medina, we're all here. Who could have offered you that much? No one can offer you that much. And Uthman radiallahu anhu, he said, I have been offered more by Allah, who has promised 10 to 700 times more. And basically he meant that the money is, the wealth, the food is going to be given free in the service of Allah, for the sake of Allah, to all the Muslims. And it brings to mind the ayah, إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ. Verily, we feed you for the sake of Allah. لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. I don't want any reward or thanks from you. I'm doing it purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this was Uthman radiallahu anhu in the lifetime of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in the lifetime of Abu Bakr and Umar, the two Khalifas of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, next week we'll speak about how he himself became the leader of the Muslims. Next two lessons.
In 2 weeks.
Is in 2 weeks' time. Yeah, so in 2 weeks' time, inshallah. Did I say next week? Sorry, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to speak about how Uthman became the leader of the Muslims and the things he did to improve the state of the Muslims and his important contributions when it came to the Muslim Ummah as a Khalifa of the Muslims. And with that, inshallah, we'll conclude. Any questions before we finish? جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت